a week or 10 days ago, I had a dream in which I was in a caper movie. And I don't know how I knew that I was in a caper movie. You just know things in dreams, don't you? And there were perhaps a few clues that this was an adventuresome film. One of them was that the actor Stellan Skarsgård was there, and he was maybe in a nod to the stroke that Skarsgård had a couple of years ago, sometimes verbal and able to speak with ease, and sometimes not able to speak at all. I don't know if there was a meaning behind that, if this was a legacy of his stroke, or if he was doing that thing that happens in films sometimes where a character will break the fourth wall and speak directly to the camera, or perhaps if the director was just yelling "cut" from time to time, and then the actors, including me, would chat. It's not clear if this was a kind of Ocean's 11 caper movie where there was a big plot that we were trying to figure out, or if it was more of a Hitchcock movie where there was a big, exciting and terrifying events taking place that were out of our control. Either way, we were waiting together, me and maybe 7 other people in a hotel room. And it turned out that the lead of the caper, the lead of the plot, was a colleague of mine. And our job was to wait, to stay awake through the night while we waited for the phone to ring. And when the phone rang, it would have the news of what we were to do. What do they say when a phone call like that comes in a movie like this? It's a go, or something like that. And other than that, other than this waiting through the night in this kind of nondescript, pleasant, innocuous hotel room, really nothing happened. We waited for the phone to ring, and that is how the dream concluded. It probably says a fair bit about my psyche that I dreamt up a caper movie in which nothing really happened. And also a caper movie in which I was a supporting character. The main character was someone else, and I was there to support or participate. I don't often remember dreams very vividly, but I remember this one. And when I woke up in the morning, it immediately occurred to me, something that I don't think had occurred to me during the dream, which is, oh, this is a dream informed by Gethsemane. This theme of waiting with another person and trying to stay awake and maybe not always succeeding. That is what happens with Jesus and the disciples in the garden. Often on this day, our focus is on Jesus, and as it should be, that is a good and fitting thing for us to focus on any time in church, but on Good Friday in particular. But this Friday, this Good Friday, perhaps informed by that dream, I am thinking of the disciples waiting in the garden in uncertainty. You and I know the end of this story. We just heard the story in its entirety, so we know what happens next. And perhaps because we've heard this story just now and perhaps many times before, we may imagine that it is proceeding with an inevitability, that it is that it's sort of a fate or an inescapable momentum which is driving the story. And sometimes Jesus does talk like that. There are times across the Gospels when he talks about the future and about his dying in particular with this startling clarity. The Son of Man must go to Jerusalem and suffer and die. He alarms his friends by talking in this way. But sometimes Jesus is not certain at all. In other accounts of Gethsemane, we heard this on Sunday. He prays to the one whom he calls Father, could this cup not pass from me? In other words, does this have to happen? Could I not escape this? So he is in a place of uncertainty, and his disciples are in a still greater place of uncertainty. They don't know what is going to happen next. They know that Jesus has created this crisis, both with the occupying forces, with the Romans, but also with the religious authorities in his own tradition, and they're not sure what is going to happen next. Maybe they've heard that their friend Judas has betrayed them. They've heard and perhaps seen some of the terrible things that the soldiers of empire do. They're wondering what might take place next. But they wonder if what might take place next might be triumph. If Judas and the soldiers and the religious authorities will come and they will become Jesus' disciples. That is a possibility. Or there's another disastrous scenario in which Judas and the soldiers and the religious authorities come and take Jesus away to kill him. And so they wait in uncertainty, and as the evening wears on, this occasionally lapses into boredom and fatigue, and they fall asleep. And that too is real, isn't it? Because these moments of waiting and uncertainty, they can be full of anxiety and fear and energy, but they can also be boring. The hours or the days or the weeks can go on, and there is a prosaicness to them. If you have ever been in a time of waiting and uncertainty, you know this strange combination of fearfulness and boredom. Think of being in the hospital room and wondering, should we engage in this intervention? Is doing these heroic measures for Mom a good idea? Will it get her more good quality of life, or will it just protract her suffering? But many of the hours in the hospital room are dull, and they drag on across hours or weeks or days or months. If you've had the experience of having a loved one who is having a deep struggle, perhaps they've sunk into alcoholism or they are living on the streets, you live in fear of the phone ringing and what disastrous, life-changing news that phone call might bring. But the days and weeks and months and years aren't daily. They are sometimes boring. Or think of the people living in Syria right now, wondering if the bombs are going to fall while the everydayness of life continues. My father said that late in the war in Germany, when the major cities were being bombed constantly, that there was this weird combination, this very weird combination of fear and sort of dull everydayness. My neighborhood is the one that they're scheduled to bomb next, he remembers a neighbor saying. And there was this acceptance of this fear and everydayness. Of course, the disciples fall asleep in their fear and exhaustion and boredom, this strange mixture altogether. I was chatting with Matt Haynes, our seminarian, earlier this week, and he said that one of the reasons that he thinks that the gospel endures across the years, across the centuries, is it's just so real. The curtain of the temple being torn in half by the Father when Jesus dies, that is what the grief of a parent is like when their son dies. And this bored anxiety that the disciples endure in Gethsemane, that is so real as well. You and I do know how this story ends. We know that after this time of waiting and heavy eyes, Jesus does go before Pilate, and then to the cross, and then to the tomb. And we know that beyond that, Easter waits. The tomb will prove to be empty, and that Jesus will be outside full of new life. So perhaps there is good news, even in the lostness and the searching of this day. God, in the end, uses everything for good, including you and me, when we wait in our perfectly imperfect way, including you and me when we are in a place of dreamy uncertainty, of anxiety and boredom, even being unable to stay awake with our friends. That too God can use for good. That too God can turn in the fullness of time into resurrection.